Welcome to Mystery Bedtime Stories. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? If you enjoy these mysterious bedtime stories, don't forget to subscribe. It helps more dreamers find their way here. Now get comfortable, close your eyes, and let your thoughts drift away. I hope you enjoy the story. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged cliffs of the Flannan Isles. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and sea, a gentle reminder of the isolation that enveloped this remote outpost. A small boat bobbed in the water, its hull glistening softly under the fading light, as three figures disembarked, their silhouettes etched against the fiery sky. James Ducat, the head lighthouse keeper, stepped ashore first, his sturdy frame silhouetted against the glorious hues of dusk. He took a moment to inhale deeply, letting the briny air fill his lungs, a familiar routine that tethered him to this place. The lighthouse loomed behind him, its tall white tower standing resolute against the encroaching night, a beacon of safety amidst the tumultuous sea. "Look at that sky," Thomas Marshall said, his voice a low murmur, filled with wonder as he followed James onto the rocky shore. "It's like the heavens are ablaze." He paused, gazing upwards, his thoughts momentarily drifting away as the last light of day surrendered to the night. "Aye, but it won't last," Donald MacArthur chimed in, his tone pragmatic. The third keeper was a man of few words, yet everyone seemed deliberate. He adjusted his cap, the wind tousling his hair as he surveyed the surroundings. "We've work to do. The light won't keep itself." With practiced efficiency, the three men gathered their gear, checking the supplies from the relief vessel that had just departed. The boat, now a mere shadow against the distant waves, carried away the previous shift, leaving only the three of them to guard the lighthouse. The solitude was both comforting and unsettling. They were a small crew against the vastness of the ocean. As they moved toward the lighthouse, the last remnants of daylight melted into twilight, filling the world with a soft, muted glow. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore accompanied their steps, a soothing symphony that echoed the heartbeat of the sea. Each footfall stirred the gravel beneath their boots, a reminder of their presence in this wild, untamed landscape. James turned to his companions, his eyes sparkling with camaraderie. "We have each other and the light. That is enough for now," he reassured them, knowing how easily the isolation could seep into one's thoughts. Thomas nodded, but his gaze drifted, unease flickering at the edges of his otherwise calm demeanor. "Do you feel it?" Thomas asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "The stillness? It's almost heavy." His brow furrowed as he scanned the horizon, where the dark waves rolled like whispers, secrets held tight beneath their surface. Donald shrugged, his expression unreadable. "It's just the dusk, Thomas. Nightfall brings its own kind of weight." Yet even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different tonight, a quietude that felt almost like a warning. They entered the lighthouse, the heavy door creaking on its hinges, revealing the interior bathed in shadows. The warmth of the lanterns flickered to life, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The lantern room, with its high arched windows, offered a breathtaking view of the sea, now a dark expanse dotted with the occasional glint of light from the distant mainland. As they ascended the spiral staircase, The familiar scent of oil and aged wood filled James's senses, grounding him in the moment. "We'll need to check the light," he said, his voice steady, "and make sure the signal is ready for any ships in the night." The three men set to work, their movements synchronized like clockwork. Yet, as they tended to their duties, an odd stillness enveloped the lighthouse, as if the very air around them held its breath. The ocean outside roared with a primal force, yet within the walls a hush settled, thickening the atmosphere. Suddenly, a distant sound broke through the tranquility, a low, mournful call from the sea, echoing against the cliffs. James paused, his hands resting on the railing, straining to listen. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his brow furrowing. Thomas and Donald exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "Probably just the wind," Donald replied, though his voice lacked conviction. As they resumed their work, the call echoed again, more pronounced this time, sending a chill creeping up James's spine. It felt like a warning, a prelude to something unknown that lurked just beyond their sight. The lighthouse stood as a sentinel against the darkening skies. But now, it seemed to him, it too was waiting, bracing for the mysteries that the night would unravel. With the lanterns flickering steadily above, James couldn't shake the sensation that they were not alone in their vigil, that the very essence of the Isles was alive with secrets yet to be disclosed. What awaited them in the depths of the night, he wondered, as the shadows began to gather, thick and expectant around them. The inside of the lighthouse was a sanctuary of warmth against the encroaching chill of night. Flickering candles cast soft, wavering shadows across the stone walls, illuminating the rich textures of aged wood and the muted colors of the lantern room. The air was thick with the scent of oil mingling with salt, creating an atmosphere that felt both familiar and strangely foreboding. James Ducat settled into his routine, a comforting ritual that anchored him amidst the uncertainties of the sea. He took a deep breath, allowing the calmness of the lighthouse to wash over him. The sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore was a gentle reminder of the world outside, a rhythmic lullaby that soothed his spirit. He moved to the table, where charts and logs were spread out, their pages dog-eared and stained with time. "Time for the evening observations," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he dipped his quill into the inkwell. The delicate scratching of the pen against the paper filled the room, a familiar sound that brought him solace. He noted the wind direction and the barometric pressure, the details that seemed so mundane, yet were crucial for the safety of any passing ships. As he wrote, he could feel the presence of his companions, Thomas and Donald, moving about the space. Thomas stood by the tall window, gazing out into the darkening sea, his silhouette framed against the glass. The waves danced beneath the silver light of the moon, their movements fluid yet unpredictable. "The sea's calm, but it feels different, almost expectant," Thomas said, his voice breaking the silence. He turned slightly, his brow furrowed in thought, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across his face. James looked up from his work, intrigued. "Expectant? What do you mean?" Thomas shifted his weight, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. It's as if the water is holding its breath, waiting for something." There was a weight in his words, a hint of unease that wrapped around the room like a thick fog. Donald, who had been quietly tending to the lanterns, paused and glanced at Thomas. "It's just the night playing tricks on your mind. We've been out here too long, mate. The sea is unpredictable, that's all." His voice held a gruff assurance, though even he couldn't entirely dismiss the tension that seemed to hang in the air. James returned to his observations, but Thomas's words lingered in his mind. He glanced out the window, where the moonlight shimmered on the waves like 1,000 tiny stars scattered across a velvet canvas. "You're right about the sea," he said thoughtfully. "It's a living thing, ever-changing, but perhaps too calm for this time of year." The three men continued their tasks, the atmosphere thick with a contemplative silence. As James penned his final notes, he felt the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. Each entry told a story of the sea, of ships lost and saved. Yet tonight, there was a sense that something deeper was at play, a mystery that danced just beyond the reach of understanding. "Do you think we'll get visitors tonight?" Thomas asked suddenly, breaking the silence, a hint of hope in his voice. "The fishing boats should be returning soon." James looked up, considering. "They are often guided by the light, but we must be vigilant. You know how easily the sea can turn." He set down his quill, his expression serious. "And it is our duty to ensure they find their way." Donald nodded, a thoughtful look crossing his face. "Let's not forget the legends that come with the tides. You know how some say the sea has its own stories to tell." "Legends?" Thomas's interest was piqued, but James quickly waved it off. "Just tales to scare the children," he replied, though a small part of him wondered if there was truth buried within those stories. As if in response, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending a shiver through the room. The sound was unsettling, a reminder of the wildness that lurked just beyond the safety of their walls. James felt an unsettling chill run down his spine, echoing Thomas's earlier sense of foreboding. "It's just the wind," he reassured himself, though the unease lingered. He glanced at Thomas, who still gazed out at the ocean, his face illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight, a look of contemplation etched upon his features. "Let's finish our duties," James said, trying to shake off the heaviness that had settled over them. "The light must be ready for the night. It's our lifeline, our only connection to the outside world." As they resumed their work, the shadows deepened, and the air filled with an anticipation that felt almost tangible. James's heart began to beat a little faster, the weight of the silence now heavy with unspoken thoughts and fears. He cast one last glance at the sea, where the waves continued their relentless dance, and wondered what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered as night descended fully upon the Flannan Isles. As twilight deepened over the Flannan Isles, the last rays of sunlight surrendered to the encroaching darkness, painting the sky in soft shades of violet and indigo. The air was imbued with the gentle saltiness of the sea, a balm against the chill of night. James Ducat leaned against the railing of the lighthouse, watching as a flock of seabirds took flight, their dark silhouettes dancing across the fading light. They glided gracefully, weaving through the air like shadows, their cries echoing softly, a haunting melody that echoed the solitude of their surroundings. "Look at them," Thomas Marshall murmured, joining James at the railing. He gestured upward, his expression a mixture of awe and unease. "They seem restless tonight." James nodded, his eyes following the birds as they spiraled overhead, their wings catching the last glimmers of light before the world fell into darkness. "They do have a certain urgency," he replied, his voice contemplative. "I've never seen them behave quite like this before." "Maybe they know something we don't," Donald MacArthur interjected, standing a few paces behind them, his brow furrowed as he observed the birds with a look of deep thought. "They say seabirds can carry souls, an old wives' tale, but tonight it seems plausible." "Souls." Thomas chuckled softly, though a flicker of intrigue lit his eyes. "You don't believe in such stories, do you, Donald?" "Aye," Donald replied, his tone serious. "Legends have a way of weaving themselves into our reality, especially out here. The sea holds its secrets, and those birds, they might be messengers." As if in response to Donald's words, the flock dipped lower, circling the lighthouse before veering toward the rocky cliffs, their calls growing louder, more desperate. The sound sent a shiver down James's spine, a whisper of foreboding that seemed to rise from the depths of the ocean itself. He found himself captivated by their erratic movements, as if they were trying to escape something lurking just beyond sight. "Perhaps they sense a storm," James suggested, trying to anchor the moment in logic, though the unease lingered. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the dark waves churned restlessly, illuminated by the silver glow of the moon. It was a sight he had witnessed countless times, yet tonight it felt different, a palpable tension in the air that he couldn't quite shake. "Or maybe it's more than that," Thomas said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "The tales we've heard around the hearth, the stories of the keepers who vanished, those birds might be a sign, a warning." James felt a tightness in his chest at the mention of the lost keepers. The stories were woven into the fabric of life on the Isles, an echo of the past that reverberated through the minds of those who remained. The lighthouse stood as a sentinel, a protector against the wildness of the sea. Yet here they were, grappling with the uncertainty that clung to the air like mist. "Do you think we'll meet the same fate?" Thomas asked suddenly, his voice trembling with an emotion that was a blend of fear and curiosity. "What if we're not just keepers of the light, but players in a greater story, one that we don't yet understand?" Donald's expression softened, a flicker of sympathy crossing his features. "Let's not go down that road, lads. We've work to do, and legends are just that, stories meant to frighten the young ones." Yet even as he spoke, his gaze remained fixed on the swirling birds, an unreadable expression shadowing his face. As the flock finally broke away and vanished into the gathering night, James felt a profound stillness settle over the lighthouse. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below became a soothing lullaby, yet it was underscored by a sense of anticipation, as if the very essence of the Isles was holding its breath. The lanterns flickered to life behind them, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the darkness enveloping the world outside. "Let's check the light," James suggested, the practicality of the moment grounding him amidst the swirling thoughts. "We can't let the night pass without ensuring it shines bright for any ships out there." The three men moved inside, the door creaking softly as they entered the warmth of the lighthouse. Yet, as they ascended the spiral staircase, a lingering feeling of unease clung to the air, as if the shadows themselves were alive with secrets. The seabirds' cries echoed faintly in their minds, a reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond the cliffs, waiting to be uncovered. As they reached the lantern room, James glanced back at his companions, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the lamps. He could see the flicker of doubt in their eyes, the weight of the night settling upon them. "Whatever the tales say, we have each other," he reassured them, though he too felt the tremor of uncertainty. "And as long as the light shines, we'll find our way through." But even as he spoke, a distant cry from the sea pierced the stillness, sending a chill through the room. It echoed like a haunting refrain, drawing their attention back with the darkness beyond the windows. The ocean stirred restlessly, and for the first time, James felt the boundaries of their reality sway, the night becoming a tapestry of whispers and shadows that hinted at stories yet to unfold. The soft glow of the lanterns flickered gently in the quarters of the lighthouse, casting warm pools of light that danced across the stone walls. James Ducat stood at the small wooden table, his hands deftly arranging a simple meal of bread, cheese, and a few pickled vegetables. The comforting aroma of the food mingled with the salty air that wafted in through the slightly open window, a reminder of the vast sea that surrounded them. "Dinner's ready, lads," James called over his shoulder, a hint of cheer in his voice. He turned to see Thomas Marshall and Donald MacArthur entering the room, their expressions a mixture of weariness and anticipation. The day had been long, and the weight of the night ahead lay heavy upon them. Thomas smiled faintly, his eyes brightening at the sight of the modest spread. "Ah, the finest banquet a keeper could ask for," he said, his tone light despite the unease that had settled over them since dusk. He moved to the table, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath his boots, and took a seat. Donald, ever the pragmatic one, shrugged off his coat and settled in beside Thomas. "A little sustenance will do us good, no doubt," he replied, though his voice carried an edge of contemplation. "We'll need our strength for the night ahead." As they shared the meal, the atmosphere shifted from tense to comfortably familiar. Laughter bubbled up between them, punctuated by stories of past storms and the oddities they had encountered while tending the lighthouse. Each tale wove a thread of camaraderie that stitched them closer together, lightening the weight of the shadows that lingered just outside their walls. "Remember that time the old fishing boat nearly capsized during the squall?" Thomas chuckled, his eyes sparkling with the memory. "You jumped in after it like some sea hero." James chuckled, a rich, warm sound that echoed through the room. "Aye, and it was you who pulled me back to safety, reminding me of the lighthouse's importance, not my foolishness." "Foolishness or bravery, it's all the same out here," Donald remarked, his mouth curving into a slight smile. "We all have our moments of both, I reckon." Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore, a constant reminder of the wild world outside. James reached for a small wooden box that held letters from his family, a treasure that kept their spirits alive amidst the isolation. He opened it carefully, the scent of aged paper wafting up to greet him. "Let me read something from home," he suggested, a sense of warmth filling the room as he unfolded an old letter. The familiar script danced across the page, and he cleared his throat softly, drawing the attention of his companions. "My dearest James," he began, his voice steady and soothing. "As the seasons change, I find myself thinking of you often, imagining the waves crashing against the cliffs, how they must sing to you in the night." Thomas leaned in closer, his expression softening. "It feels like we're right there with you, James," he said quietly, the tension of earlier moments easing into something more tender. James continued, the words flowing from the page, painting a picture of home. "Though the wind howls and the nights are long, remember that family and home remain in the heart, no matter the distance." As he finished reading, a silence enveloped the room, each man lost in his thoughts. The flickering light of the lanterns cast gentle shadows, creating an intimate cocoon that felt safe against the encroaching darkness. "Your family sounds like a good bunch," Donald said finally, breaking the silence, his voice softer than usual. "It must be hard to be away from them." James nodded, a hint of melancholy in his eyes. "It is, but we have each other, and that counts for something, doesn't it?" "Aye," Thomas agreed, a smile breaking through his earlier unease. "In this darkness, we are not alone." Just then, a soft, mournful cry echoed from outside, cutting through the warmth of their gathering. The sound was distant yet haunting, resonating in the depths of their hearts. The men exchanged glances, the earlier camaraderie suddenly replaced by a shared unease. "What was that?" Thomas asked, his brow furrowed in concern. "Probably just the wind playing tricks," Donald replied, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. James felt a shiver race down his spine, the weight of the night pressing in around them. "Let's not dwell on it. We're here for each other." He gestured toward the lanterns, their steady glow a beacon of hope against the vastness of the unknown. As they resumed their meal, the shadows danced playfully around them, but the air felt thick with unspoken fears. The ocean's whispers grew louder outside, a reminder of the mysteries that lurked just beyond their sight. They finished their meal in quiet contemplation, the bonds of friendship growing stronger even as the night deepened around them. Outside, the lighthouse stood resolute, its light cutting through the darkness, a guardian against the secrets that churned in the depths of the sea. Each man felt the weight of the night ahead, the unknown stretching out before them like the vast ocean, offering both comfort and uncertainty in equal measure. The lighthouse stood tall against the backdrop of an ink-black sky, its light sweeping across the horizon like a vigilant guardian. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with an unsettling calm that seemed to wrap itself around the three men. James Ducat and Donald MacArthur sat at the small wooden table, their evening meal long forgotten, as they stared into the distance, lost in thoughts that felt heavier than the night itself. James had always found solace in the rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs, a soothing lullaby that often lulled him into a contemplative state. But tonight, the ocean was eerily quiet, its surface smooth like glass, reflecting the cold light of the stars above. He glanced at the logbook resting on the table, where he had meticulously noted the conditions of the sea. "Calm seas should bring peace," he murmured, his voice barely breaking the silence. "But tonight, it feels like a secret's about to break free." Donald shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing as he considered James's words. "Aye, it does have a strange feel to it." He rubbed the back of his neck, a sign of the unease that had settled in his bones. Something's off. The flickering lantern light cast shadows that danced across Donald's face, highlighting the tension etched in his features. James could see the restless energy radiating from him. The man seemed almost unable to remain still. The calmness of the sea contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing within Donald, and it unsettled James more than he cared to admit. "Do you remember the stories?" Donald asked suddenly, breaking the silence that had fallen over them. "About the keepers who vanished without a trace." James nodded slowly, the memories flooding back with a clarity that made his skin prickle. "Aye, the tales of the fourth keeper," he replied, his voice low and contemplative. "They say he spoke to the sea, that he heard whispers in the night. Some say he was taken by the very depths he tended." Donald leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as if trying to pierce the veil of the night outside. "What if there's some truth to those stories? We're alone out here, surrounded by the vastness of the ocean. It makes a man wonder." The hairs on the back of James's neck stood on end at the thought. He had always dismissed the legends as mere folklore, stories spun to frighten the young and naive. Yet, as he gazed out at the stillness beyond the lighthouse walls, a sense of foreboding crept into his heart. "We're not alone," he said, more to reassure himself than to convince Donald. "We have each other. That's what matters." But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of the silence pressing down on them, as if the very air had thickened with unspoken fears. The lanterns flickered, their light wavering as if caught in a draught, and for a moment, both men held their breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. A distant sound echoed through the air, a low, mournful cry that seemed to rise from the depths of the sea. James's heart raced, and he exchanged a glance with Donald, whose expression mirrored his own mix of concern and curiosity. "Did you hear that?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Aye," Donald replied, his eyes wide. "It sounded like a wail." They both stood, drawn to the large window that overlooked the ocean. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery light over the water, but the calm surface betrayed nothing of the turmoil beneath. The waves, once a comforting presence, now felt like a shroud, hiding secrets that had yet to be revealed. "Maybe it was just a seal," James suggested, though the words felt hollow in his mouth. He could feel the tension building, an invisible thread that connected them both to the mysteries of the night. "Or maybe it's something more," Donald countered, his voice thick with unease. "We've felt it before. The weight of the night, the sense that something is watching us. It's not just the sea, it's the history of this place." James turned back to the table, his mind racing through the stories he had grown up hearing. The keepers lost to the tides, the haunting calls that echoed through the cliffs. "We must stay vigilant," he said, trying to banish the creeping dread that threatened to envelop him. "No matter how calm the sea appears, we cannot let our guard down." Donald nodded, though the flicker of doubt in his eyes persisted. "You're right," he said, though his voice was laced with uncertainty. "But what are we to do? We can't control what the sea decides to reveal." The lighthouse groaned softly, as if in response to their conversation. James took a deep breath, grounding himself in the familiar scent of oil and salt that filled the room. "We do what we've always done. We keep the light shining and watch over this place together. Whatever it is, we face it as a team." As the men stood together, the lanterns above them casting a warm glow. They felt the weight of the night's mysteries bearing down. The call from the sea echoed again, a haunting reminder of the unknown that lay just beyond their reach. The lighthouse, a steadfast sentinel against the darkness, felt both a sanctuary and a prison, holding within its walls the stories of those who had come before. With each passing moment, the stillness deepened, wrapping the lighthouse in a cocoon of quiet contemplation. James glanced out into the darkness, a mixture of fear and determination swelling within him. They were keepers of the light, bound by duty and the echoes of the past. And as the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was merely the prelude to a storm, one that would reveal the secrets the sea had yet to share. The moon hung high in the velvet sky, casting a silvery glow over the rugged landscape of the Flannan Isles. The lighthouse stood tall and proud, its light sweeping over the dark waters like a guardian keeping watch over the secrets of the sea. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled through the grasses, carrying with it the salty scent of the ocean, a reminder of the vastness that surrounded the solitary structure. Thomas Marshall stood on the rocky outcrop near the lighthouse, gazing out at the endless expanse of water. The waves lapped softly against the rocks, their rhythmic sound a soothing backdrop to the stillness of the night. He wrapped his arms around himself, feeling the cool air brush against his skin, a comforting embrace that both calmed and unsettled him. As he stood there, his thoughts drifted back to the stories whispered among the keepers. Tales of voices carried on the wind, of shadows that moved just out of sight. He had always dismissed them as mere folklore, the product of too many lonely nights spent in the lighthouse. Yet tonight, an inexplicable sense of unease settled over him, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. Suddenly, a faint whisper mingled with the gentle breeze, sending a shiver down Thomas's spine. He turned his head, straining to catch the words that seemed to float just beyond his hearing. "Is someone there?" he called out, his voice barely breaking the stillness. The only response was the soft rustle of grass and the distant murmur of the sea. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. "Who walks these rocks at night, if it's not flesh and blood?" he mused aloud, the sound of his own voice feeling strangely foreign in the quiet. He stepped closer to the edge, peering into the darkness, but nothing emerged from the shadows. The moonlight illuminated the jagged cliffs, revealing nothing but the rugged terrain and the endless sea. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. The tales of the lost keepers echoed in his mind, stirring a mix of fear and curiosity. What if there was more to those stories? What if the winds carried messages from the depths, whispers from souls long gone? He shook his head, trying to dispel the absurdity of such thoughts, yet the chill that accompanied them lingered. The sea shimmered under the moonlight, its surface reflecting 1,000 stars. But beneath that beauty lay the unknown, the depths where secrets festered and shadows danced. Thomas felt a pull, an urge to venture closer to the edge, to peer into the darkness and confront whatever lay hidden just out of sight. But the lighthouse stood as a reminder of his duty, the light that must shine to guide the wayward sailors through the night. Yet, as he turned back toward the lighthouse, he caught a glimpse of movement at the corner of his eye. His heart raced as he spun around, but the rocks were empty, the shadows silent. "It's just the wind," he reassured himself, though he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that made every hair on his body stand on end. "Donald," he called out, his voice echoing into the night, but there was no response. The lighthouse felt distant now, a solitary refuge against the vastness of the sea. Thomas took a step back, feeling the ground beneath him shift slightly, as if the earth itself held its breath. He needed to return, to shake off this creeping sense of dread that clung to him like a second skin. As he made his way back toward the warmth of the lighthouse, the whispers in the wind seemed to grow louder, intertwining with the sound of the waves. It was as if the sea was beckoning him, urging him to listen closer, to delve deeper into the mysteries that lay just beyond reach. He paused for a moment, glancing back at the water, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a figure standing at the edge of the rocks, shrouded in darkness. His heart raced as he blinked, but the figure vanished into the night. "What was that?" he whispered to himself, feeling a mixture of fear and intrigue welling inside him. The stories of the keepers, the legends of voices carried on the wind, they felt more real than ever in that moment. He hurried back inside the lighthouse, the heavy door creaking on its hinges as he entered. The familiar warmth enveloped him, and the flickering lanterns cast a soft glow that chased away the shadows. Yet the unease remained, lingering in the corners of his mind, whispering secrets he couldn't quite grasp. "James? Donald?" he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. But the only response was the gentle hum of the lanterns and the distant roar of the sea. He felt the weight of solitude press upon him, the isolation of the Isles tightening around his heart like a vice. The night stretched ahead, alive with possibilities, each one more haunting than the last. As he settled into a chair, trying to calm his racing thoughts, he couldn't help but glance out the window again. The moon shimmered on the water, and the darkness beyond seemed to pulse with a life of its own. What if the sea did hold secrets? What if the whispers were real? He shook his head, trying to dispel the thoughts. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something was waiting for them, lurking just beyond the reach of the light, and the mysteries of the night were only just beginning to unfold. The lantern room atop the lighthouse glowed warmly against the encroaching chill of the night. James Ducat sat at the small wooden table, surrounded by the gentle hum of the lanterns, their light flickering softly like a heartbeat in the stillness. Before him lay the logbook, its pages well-worn and filled with the meticulous entries of countless shifts. He dipped his quill into the inkwell, the familiar scent of oil and paper grounding him amidst the swirling thoughts that raced through his mind. The rhythmic sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below provided a soothing backdrop. Yet tonight, the ocean felt different. A quiet, simmering tension under the calm surface. As he began to pen his observations, James couldn't shake the feeling that the sea was whispering secrets, urging him to listen more closely. "Another calm night," he murmured to himself, his quill scratching against the paper. "Sky clear, no storms in sight." He paused, glancing out the tall windows where the moonlight poured in, illuminating the dark waters. Yet, something stirs beneath. He continued to write, detailing the wind's direction and the temperature. But as he reflected on the day's events, an unsettling thought crept into his mind. The reports from the mainland had spoken of foul weather approaching, yet here he was, surrounded by a serene landscape that belied any hint of danger. James felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Even if the skies say one thing, my heart knows another," he whispered, the words escaping like a confession to the empty room. Across the table, Donald MacArthur entered the lantern room, his brow furrowed with concern. "What's troubling you, James?" he asked, his voice low and carefully measured, as if he too could sense the weight of the night. James looked up, meeting Donald's gaze. "It's the log. The weather reports don't match what we see here. The mainland speaks of storms, yet the sea remains tranquil." Donald leaned against the table, his arms crossed, contemplating the implications of James's words. I felt it too. A calm like this. It feels like the sea is holding its breath, waiting." James nodded, the weight of their isolation pressing upon him. "It's unsettling. I can't help but wonder if we're missing something, if there's more to this night than the stillness we observe." Donald's eyes flickered to the logbook, and he stepped closer, scanning the entries. "What do you mean? Are there any signs?" James hesitated, then pointed to a few recent entries. "Look here. The last few nights have recorded odd occurrences, strange sounds from the sea, moments where the light flickered as if responding to something outside. I've documented everything, but tonight, it feels as if we're on the edge of something." "Stories of the keepers who vanished have always whispered through the Isles," Donald replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Perhaps those tales hold more truth than we care to admit." The flickering lanterns cast shadows that danced across the walls, and for a moment, both men were lost in thought. The air felt electric, thick with anticipation. It was as if the lighthouse itself had come alive, its stones holding memories of those who had come before them, their lives woven into the very fabric of this place. "Do you think they heard the whispers too?" James asked, his voice barely above a murmur. "What if they were drawn to the sea in the same way I feel compelled to listen now?" Donald straightened, his expression resolute. "We're keepers of the light, James. Our duty is to protect those who sail these waters, not to delve into the unknown. We must remain vigilant." James nodded, attempting to shake off the creeping unease that had settled within him. "You're right. But as the light guides others, we must also heed its warning. There's a difference between vigilance and ignorance." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and for a moment it felt as if the very walls of the lighthouse were pressing in on them. The echoes of the sea murmured through the cracks, a haunting melody that beckoned James to listen closer. "Perhaps we should check the lantern," James suggested, trying to divert their thoughts from the unsettling atmosphere. "Ensure it's ready for whatever the night may bring." Donald nodded, and together they moved toward the light, the flickering lanterns illuminating their path. As they ascended the spiral staircase, each step felt heavy with the weight of their thoughts. The darkness beyond the windows seemed to close in, shadows shifting as if they were alive, whispering secrets just out of reach. In the lantern room, the bright beacon stood tall, its light cutting through the ink-black night. James reached for the mechanism, his fingers brushing against the cool metal. "We'll keep the light shining," he declared, a quiet determination filling his voice. "No matter the storm, we will guide those who need us." As he adjusted the lamp, a faint echo of laughter drifted through the air, a sound both familiar and foreign. James paused, glancing at Donald, who wore an expression of uncertainty. "Did you hear that?" James asked, his heart racing. Donald's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition passing through his gaze. "It's just the wind," he replied quickly, but even he couldn't entirely dismiss the unease that clung to the air. James shook his head, a sense of urgency washing over him. It felt like voices from the past. "We're not alone in this watch." The lantern's light flickered in response, casting elongated shadows against the walls, and for a brief moment, James felt the presence of those who had come before him, the keepers whose stories lived on in the whispers of the sea. With newfound resolve, James turned back to the logbook, determined to record the night's events, to capture the heartbeat of their vigil amidst the unknown. "We will document everything," he declared, his voice steady. "The sea speaks in riddles, and we will be the ones to decipher its meanings." As the lantern continued to shine brightly, illuminating the vastness of the night, James felt a sense of purpose growing within him. They were keepers of a light that flickered against the dark, guardians of a mystery that called to them from the depths. With the echoes of the past swirling around them, the night stretched ahead, full of possibilities and unanswered questions, waiting to unfold like the waves upon the shore. The mist rolled in thick and heavy, wrapping the Flannan Isles in a shroud of white that softened the edges of the world. Donald MacArthur stepped outside the lighthouse, the familiar creak of the heavy door echoing in the silence. The air was damp and cool, a gentle reminder of the sea that surrounded them. As he inhaled deeply, the scent of salt mingled with the earthy aroma of wet stone, a comforting blend that reminded him of countless nights spent watching over the waves. Yet tonight, the usual tranquility felt different. The mist hung low, swallowing the rocky outcrops and blurring the lines between land and sea. Donald squinted into the thick fog, sensing an unfamiliar presence as he stepped cautiously onto the worn path that led toward the cliffs. The soft crunch of gravel beneath his boots was the only sound, a solitary rhythm in the enveloping stillness. "Just the mist," he murmured to himself, shaking his head as he fought against a wave of unease. Yet, as he walked, something tugged at the corners of his mind, a nagging feeling that he was not alone. It was an instinctive knowledge, a primal awareness that set his heart racing in a way that he couldn't quite explain. As he ventured further into the mist, he paused, noticing something unusual on the ground. There, pressed into the damp earth, were footprints leading toward the edge of the cliffs. He knelt down, studying the prints, distinct and clear against the barren stone, yet they were unlike any he had seen before. They appeared too small to belong to a man, too delicate to belong to a creature he could identify. "Who could have been here?" he whispered, his voice barely breaking the heavy silence. The prints led toward the rocky edge, where the sea churned beneath, hidden from view. A shiver raced down his spine, and he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. These prints, they lead nowhere, yet aren't mine. Donald's mind raced with possibilities. The stories of the lost keepers floated back to him, tales of the inexplicable and the unseen. Had they left traces of their presence in the night? Or was this something entirely different? something that belonged to this very isle, a secret waiting to be unveiled. He rose slowly, scanning the misty expanse with cautious eyes. The feeling of being watched intensified, prickling at the back of his mind. Every shadow in the fog seemed to shift, as though it held a life of its own, and he could almost hear the whispers of the sea beckoning him closer. "James! Thomas!" he called out, his voice rising above the hush. But only the echo of his words returned to him. The lighthouse, standing tall and steadfast, felt like a distant fortress, a beacon of safety that now seemed far removed from the mysteries lurking in the mist. A gust of wind swept through, swirling the fog and momentarily clearing his view. For a fleeting moment, Donald caught sight of something moving at the periphery of his vision, a shadow darting just beyond the edge of the cliffs. It was gone before he could fully perceive it, but the lingering chill in the air told him it had been real. He took a step forward, the footprints beckoning him. What if they led to answers? What if he followed them to the truth that had eluded the keepers for so long? The thought ignited a flicker of determination within him, but it was quickly extinguished by a wave of instinctive caution. "Best not to stray too far," he muttered, glancing back toward the lighthouse, its warm light now a comforting glow amidst the encroaching darkness. He knew he shouldn't wander too far from the safety of its beacon. Reluctantly, he turned back to the lighthouse, casting one last glance over his shoulder. The mist rolled in thicker, and the footprints began to fade, merging with the earth like a secret being swallowed by the night. Donald stepped back inside, the solid door closing behind him with a soft thud. But the sense of something lurking beyond the safety of the walls clung to him. As he stood in the lantern room, the light illuminating the space around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Isles held more than just tales of lost keepers. They were alive with whispers and shadows, and he knew that the night was far from over. With each passing moment, the mystery deepened, wrapping itself around him like the mist that clung to the cliffs. Donald's heart raced as he realized they were not merely keepers of the light, but custodians of secrets that had long been buried beneath the waves. And as the lighthouse stood sentinel against the dark, he knew they were on the brink of revealing something profound. If only they dared to look deeper into the shadows. The wind whispered through the cracks of the lighthouse, carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep into the very stones themselves. Inside, the three keepers gathered beneath the vaulted ceiling of the lantern room, their faces illuminated by the flickering light, a fragile beacon against the encroaching darkness that swirled outside. James Duckett leaned against the cool stone wall, arms crossed, watching his companions with a furrowed brow. "It feels different tonight," he said, his voice low, almost drowned by the sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs below. The waves roared like distant thunder, a reminder of the tempest that lurked just beyond sight. Thomas Marshall stood by the window, peering out into the murky depths of the fog that had rolled in like a shroud, swallowing the landscape whole. "Different how?" he asked, though a shiver ran through him as he spoke. "Like the island itself speaks to us," James replied, his gaze fixed on the turbulent sea. "A storm here is felt before it's seen. The air carries a weight, an anticipation." Donald MacArthur, who had been quietly adjusting the lanterns, paused and turned to face them. "Whatever it is, I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched, he said, his voice steady yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. Something stirs out there, something that doesn't want us here. The words hung in the air between them, thickening the atmosphere with a sense of foreboding. The lanterns flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced across the stone walls, and for a moment, none of them spoke. They exchanged glances, each man's eyes reflecting the shared anxiety that had settled over them like a heavy cloak. "What do you think it is?" Thomas finally asked, breaking the silence. "Is it merely the storm that unsettles us, or is it something deeper?" James took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I've heard the whispers in the wind, tales of the keepers who vanished," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's as if their stories linger, caught in the air like the mist. They say the sea remembers." Donald nodded solemnly, the weight of their history pressing down upon them. "We're not the first to feel this way. This sense of dread. It's part of being here, tied to this place and its legends." He stepped closer to James, the flickering light casting a warm glow over his features. "But we are here, and we must face whatever comes. Together." The solidarity in Donald's words brought a flicker of comfort, yet the unease remained, gnawing at the edges of their resolve. Thomas crossed his arms, glancing out into the fog once more. "What if it's the sea itself calling us? What if it's beckoning us to uncover what lies beneath?" James shook his head, his voice firm. "We must not be lured by that call. We are keepers of the light, guardians against the darkness. Our duty is to protect those who sail these waters, not to surrender ourselves to the mysteries that haunt them." "But what if those mysteries hold the key to understanding?" Thomas pressed, his eyes bright with curiosity. "What if they reveal truths we've yet to grasp?" The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, sending a shiver through James. "Curiosity can lead to peril," he cautioned, feeling the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "We must tread carefully, remain vigilant." The storm outside intensified, the waves crashing against the rocks with a ferocity that sent a tremor through the lighthouse. The lanterns flickered violently, casting chaotic shadows that danced like phantoms in the corners of the room. "Look!" Thomas exclaimed, pointing toward the window. "The light! It's—" Before he could finish, the lanterns dimmed, and a silence fell over them, thick and suffocating. The light flickered one last time before plunging them into darkness, leaving only the sound of their breaths mingling with the roar of the storm outside. James felt his heart race, the absence of light wrapping around them like a shroud. "Stay calm," he urged, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "We have our lanterns. We'll light them and—" A sudden crash echoed from below, reverberating through the lighthouse like a warning bell. The darkness shifted, and James could sense the tension mounting among his companions. "Did you hear that?" Donald whispered, his voice barely audible above the raging storm. "Yes," James replied, fear creeping into his voice. "We need to investigate." As they fumbled for the matches, the reality of their situation settled heavily upon them. The lighthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a confining cage, each shadow a reminder of the uncertainty that lurked beyond. They lit their lanterns one by one, the soft glow illuminating their faces and providing a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. With lanterns in hand, They moved cautiously toward the heavy door that led to the lower levels of the lighthouse. The sound of the crashing waves grew louder, a reminder of the power of the sea that lay just beyond their walls. They exchanged wary glances, the unspoken bond between them deepening as they prepared to face whatever awaited them. "Together," James murmured, his voice resolute as he pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. The wind rushed in, carrying with it the scent of salt and something else, something ancient and foreboding that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. As they stepped into the unknown, the lanterns cast flickering shadows against the damp stone walls, illuminating the path ahead. The storm outside raged on, but within the lighthouse, a different kind of storm brewed, one that threatened to unearth the secrets buried deep within the heart of the Flannan Isles. In that moment, as they ventured forth, James felt a shift in the air, a palpable tension that hinted at the mysteries waiting to be revealed. The night was far from over, and the echoes of the past resonated through the very stones of the lighthouse, calling them toward their fate. Thomas Marshall stood in the lantern room, the familiar warmth of the lanterns flickering softly around him, creating gentle shadows that danced against the stone walls. He had checked the light countless times, each routine a comforting ritual that grounded him amidst the isolation of the Flannan Isles. But tonight, as he peered into the darkness, a creeping sense of unease settled in his chest. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs echoed like a distant heartbeat. Thomas felt a chill, despite the warmth of the lanterns. The light had always been a steadfast companion, a beacon that guided sailors through the night. But now, as he turned to the mechanism, an unsettling thought crossed his mind. What if the light refused to shine? With steady hands, he adjusted the lamp, ensuring the oil was plentiful and the wick trimmed. He took a deep breath, the scent of oil mingling with the salty air that drifted in through the window, bringing with it a memory of calm nights spent watching the stars twinkle above the ocean. Yet tonight, the stars were hidden behind a thick veil of clouds, and the sea felt restless, its waves roiling ominously against the rocks. As he cranked the mechanism, the familiar sound of gears turning filled the air, but the light above him flickered and dimmed, refusing to beam out into the dark expanse. Panic surged within him, and his heart raced as he tried again, adjusting the wick, but the light remained stubbornly low. "No," he whispered, desperation creeping into his voice. "Not now." The surrounding darkness thickened, swallowing the room as the lantern's glow faltered like a heartbeat struggling to maintain its rhythm. Thomas felt the weight of the shadows pressing in, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The light refuses the sea, and that's what we fear most of all, he murmured to himself, a chill running down his spine as he recalled the tales of the keepers who had vanished, their lights extinguished in the darkest of nights. The lantern's flicker seemed to taunt him, each moment of dimness a reminder of the unknown that lurked beyond the safety of the lighthouse walls. He stepped closer to the window, peering into the fog that enveloped the cliffs, the sea now a foreboding presence that loomed just out of sight. The whispers of the night crept into his mind, echoing with a haunting familiarity. What if the legends were true? What if the sea was indeed alive, waiting for something to break the silence? He turned back to the lantern, a sense of urgency flooding his veins. "Come on," he urged softly, willing the light to respond, to fight against the darkness that threatened to consume them. But the mechanism remained unyielding, the light refusing to meet his desperate plea. A gust of wind rattled the window, and Thomas jumped, his heart racing. He could almost sense something watching him from beyond the glass, a presence lurking in the mist that surrounded the lighthouse. The stories whispered among the keepers echoed in his mind, the tales of shadows that moved on their own, of voices carried on the wind, beckoning them toward the unknown. "James, Donald," he called, his voice trembling slightly as he reached for the matches that lay scattered on the table. He needed their help. He needed the comfort of their presence to chase away the encroaching dread that clung to him like a shroud. The lantern's glow was their lifeline, their only connection to the outside world, and without it, they were adrift in an ocean of uncertainty. As he struck a match, the flame flared to life, illuminating the small space with a warm glow that felt fragile against the vastness of the night. He lit the lantern quickly, watching as the light flickered back to life, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Relief surged through him, but it was short-lived. The darkness outside felt deeper now, more oppressive, as if it were alive with secrets waiting to be unearthed. "Where are you?" he whispered, glancing toward the heavy door that led to the lower levels. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the wind howling outside. The lighthouse felt like a fortress, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a prison, one that held within its walls the echoes of those who had come before. With a renewed sense of purpose, Thomas moved toward the door, his lantern held high, casting a warm glow that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. Each creak of the floorboards beneath his feet echoed in the stillness, a reminder that he was not alone in this vigil. The lighthouse stood as a sentinel against the night, but the weight of the unseen pressed down upon him, a reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond reach. The door creaked open, revealing the steep staircase that spiraled downward into the depths of the lighthouse. Thomas took a deep breath, steadying himself against the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. He would not be consumed by the shadows. He would confront whatever lay hidden in the depths of the night. As he descended the stairs, the light from his lantern flickered, casting playful shadows that danced against the stone walls. The air grew cooler, and the sound of the wind faded into a distant murmur, replaced by the steady thrum of his heartbeat. The darkness felt alive, pulsing with an energy that both terrified and intrigued him. Suddenly, a distant sound broke through the silence, a low, mournful call that resonated from the depths of the sea. Thomas paused, his heart racing as the echoes of the past surged through him. It was a haunting reminder of the legends, of the souls lost to the ocean's depths, and the stories that had woven themselves into the very fabric of the lighthouse. "James! Donald!" he called again, desperation creeping into his voice as he reached the bottom of the stairs. The lantern flickered once more, the light struggling against the shadows that threatened to engulf him. He took a step forward, drawn toward the sound, a pull he couldn't resist. The night was thick with tension, and as he moved deeper into the darkness, the whispers of the sea beckoned him closer, urging him to uncover the truths that lay hidden beneath the waves. In that moment, as the shadows danced around him and the lantern flickered like a heartbeat. Thomas felt the weight of the night pressing down upon him. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles were alive, and he was determined to face them, even if it meant confronting the very darkness that sought to consume him. The lantern room was dim, the soft glow of the flickering light casting an ethereal ambiance over the cramped quarters. Donald MacArthur sat on the edge of his narrow bed, the rough wool blanket pulled up to his knees. The warmth of the lantern flickered against the cold stone walls, creating dancing shadows that seemed to weave an intricate tapestry of light and dark. Outside, the wind howled, a haunting serenade that echoed against the lighthouse, wrapping around it like a ghostly embrace. He stared out the small window, the fog swirling thickly, obscuring the rocky cliffs and the churning sea below. The familiar sound of the waves crashing against the rocks felt both comforting and ominous, a reminder of the power that lay just beyond their refuge. But tonight, there was something else, a quiet presence, an inexplicable feeling that sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't shake the sensation that he was not alone. "Just the wind," he murmured to himself, though the words felt hollow. The tales of the Isles being a crossover for spirits played in his mind like a haunting refrain. Hadn't the old keeper once said that the sea summoned souls to its embrace? If that were true, then who was he to deny their existence? With a soft sigh, Donald leaned back against the rough-hewn wall, letting his eyes drift shut for a moment. The lighthouse was a sanctuary, yet tonight it felt like a bridge between worlds. He recalled the stories told by the fire, tales of sailors who had vanished into the mist, their souls forever wandering the shores, searching for home. There was a weight in the air, a palpable tension that hinted at secrets waiting to be unveiled. As he listened to the wind howl, a soft sound broke through, a whisper, barely discernible yet distinctly close. His heart quickened, and he opened his eyes, glancing around the room. The shadows flickered, stretching and contracting in the lantern's glow, but nothing appeared out of the ordinary. "It's just your imagination," he chided himself, yet doubt gnawed at his resolve. He stood, the floorboards creaking beneath his weight as he moved toward the window. The fog pressed against the glass, a thick curtain that obscured the outside world. Leaning closer, he squinted into the dark expanse, searching for any sign of movement. The sea roared beneath the mist, its voice rising and falling like a lament. "Is anyone out there?" he whispered, half hoping for a reply. The silence that followed felt heavy, wrapping around him like a shroud. He could almost hear the echoes of the past, the whispering winds carrying the stories of those who had come before him. A shiver ran down his spine, and he took a step back, the weight of their narratives pressing down on him. Maybe it's time to let go, he thought, his mind drifting to the sea. If the spirits of the lost were indeed drawn to this place, then perhaps they sought solace in the light of the lighthouse. If the sea summons spirits to its embrace, who am I to deny? The thought was both comforting and unsettling, a paradox that lingered in his mind. The lantern flickered again, and Donald felt an inexplicable pull, a longing to reach out, to connect with the unseen. He turned back toward his bed, the soft wool blanket a reminder of warmth and safety. Yet, as he settled back down, the whisper came again, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to resonate with the very stones of the lighthouse. "Donald." It was a voice, faint but unmistakable, woven into the fabric of the night. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. "Is someone there?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly in the stillness. The shadows danced, flickering in response, and he felt a rush of energy in the air, a current that sent a chill coursing through him. "Speak to me," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. The air grew colder, and he could feel the presence drawing nearer, wrapping around him like a familiar embrace. He closed his eyes, surrendering to the moment, feeling the weight of the night settle around him. In that suspended moment, Donald became acutely aware of the stories that had come before him, the lost keepers, the sailors, and the spirits that roamed the shores. He felt their longing, their search for connection, and he realized that he too was part of this tapestry, woven into the very essence of the Flannan Isles. As the winds howled outside, he found solace in the darkness, a sense of belonging that transcended time and space. The world beyond the lighthouse faded away, leaving only the light that shone within, a beacon for those who wandered in the shadows. And as he surrendered to the night, the whispers grew louder, guiding him deeper into the mysteries that lay ahead, inviting him to uncover the truths that had long been hidden beneath the waves. The dawn broke slowly over the horizon, a soft blush of pink and gold melding into the pale blue sky. The Flannan Isles, typically shrouded in mist during the early hours, appeared almost ethereal, the lighthouse standing sentinel against the awakening day. Thomas Marshall stepped out onto the weathered boardwalk, the cool wood beneath his feet grounding him in the moment. He took a deep breath, inhaling the briny air that carried whispers of the sea, mingled with the earthy scent of the wet earth. The world around him was waking, the calls of seabirds punctuating the serene silence, yet something felt amiss. The weight of the night lingered heavily in his chest, a palpable unease that gnawed at his resolve. He had spent countless hours in this lighthouse, securing the light that guided sailors home, but now the light felt dimmer somehow. The shadows of the night seemed to cling to him, refusing to dissipate with the dawn. He turned to see James Ducat emerging from the lighthouse, his expression thoughtful, as if he too felt the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of the shared burden they bore. The unease that had settled in the depths of their hearts was not just a product of the isolation, but a stirring of something deeper, something that lay just beneath the surface of their existence on the Isles. "Another day," Thomas said quietly, his voice barely rising above the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs. It felt like a hollow statement, devoid of the usual optimism he would have embraced. James nodded, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "Aye," he replied, his tone steady but laced with a hint of resignation. "But we cannot ignore the shadows that linger." They stepped closer to the edge of the boardwalk, where the ground sloped down toward the rocky shore, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. The light from the lighthouse flickered behind, a steadfast reminder of their duty, yet it felt increasingly distant, as if the very essence of the lighthouse was slowly succumbing to the mysteries that surrounded it. "What do we do?" Thomas asked, his voice a whisper carried by the wind. "We've done our part. We keep the light shining, but the sea, it feels different." James looked out over the water, his thoughts drifting like the clouds above. Perhaps it's not enough just to keep the light. Perhaps we need to confront what lies beneath, what has been hidden from us. The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with implications. The idea of facing the unknown was daunting, yet the thought of remaining passive felt like a betrayal to their purpose. The waves lapped at the rocks below, their rhythmic sound a reminder of the relentless force of nature, a force that had claimed so many before them. "We are keepers, Thomas," James continued, his voice steadying. "We've sworn an oath to protect this light, to guide those who sail these waters. But what of our souls? What of the stories that have been lost in the depths?" Thomas felt an ache in his heart at the weight of James's words. The stories of the keepers who had vanished, the whispers of the sea that beckoned to them. These were not mere legends, but echoes of their own reality. He looked toward the horizon, where the sun had begun to peak above the waves, cast in a golden shimmer over the water. There was beauty in this place, but it was marred by the darkness that lingered just out of sight. "What if we are meant to uncover those stories?" Thomas said softly, the dawning realization settling in. "What if the sea calls us to remember, to acknowledge what has been lost?" James turned to him, a flicker of understanding igniting in his eyes. "Then we must listen. We must be brave enough to seek out the truth, even if it leads us into the heart of the storm." The wind rustled through the grasses that clung stubbornly to the cliffs, a gentle reminder of the wildness that surrounded them. Thomas felt a surge of determination swell within him. They had spent too long in silence, too long allowing the shadows to dictate their reality. It was time to confront the whispers, to seek the truth that lay beneath the surface. As the first rays of sunlight broke through, illuminating the lighthouse and the rugged landscape, Thomas and James exchanged a resolute glance. Their footsteps echoed softly on the boardwalk as they turned toward the sea, leaving behind the familiar safety of the lighthouse. With each step, they moved closer to the unknown, their hearts steadying with purpose. The air was thick with anticipation, the dawn promising more than just a new day. It held the potential for revelation. The waves crashed against the rocks below, a symphony of sound that echoed their resolve. And as they stepped closer to the edge, the shadows began to recede, replaced by the warmth of the sun's embrace. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, guided by the light of their friendship and the whispers of the sea. With the lighthouse behind them and the vastness of the ocean stretching out before them, they found solace in the knowledge that they were not bound by fear, but united in the pursuit of understanding. The journey was just beginning, and the mysteries of the Flannan Isles awaited their discovery, wrapped in the calm yet intriguing embrace of the unfolding dawn. The lighthouse stood silent, a sentinel against the encroaching dawn, its once vibrant light now reduced to a dim glow, flickering intermittently as if struggling against an unseen weight. The air was thick with an eerie tranquility, the kind that seemed to blanket the world in an unsettling hush. Outside, the sea continued its relentless dance, waves crashing against the cliffs, yet within the walls of the lighthouse, a profound stillness reigned. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with absence. The lantern room, usually filled with the warmth of camaraderie, now felt like a hollow shell. The table was set as it had been the night before, but the three familiar places remained untouched, their owners lost to the shadows of the night. Thomas, James, and Donald had been there, had shared laughter and fear, stories and silence. But now, only echoes lingered, whispering reminders of what had once been. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the windows, casting long, slanted shadows across the stone floor, the absence was palpable. It was as if the lighthouse itself mourned, each creak of wood, every soft sigh of the wind, a lament for the keepers who had vanished into the depths of the night. The stillness was deafening, a stark contrast to the uproar of the sea outside, which continued to roar and crash as if mocking the calmness within. Thomas stood at the window, gazing out into the fog that clung to the shoreline like a ghostly veil. The world beyond was obscured, the once familiar cliffs now shrouded in a thick mist that swallowed everything whole. It felt as though the very landscape was holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass, hoping to glimpse a sign of life, a flicker of movement that would dispel the unnerving stillness. But there was nothing, only the relentless rhythm of the waves. The memory of their last moments together lingered in the air, an echo of shared fears and whispered hopes. They had spoken of the sea, of the legends that surrounded the isles, but now those tales felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of the mysteries they had dared to confront. "What lies beneath?" Thomas murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid that speaking the question aloud would summon the very shadows they had tried to understand. With a heavy heart, he turned away from the window, the chill of despair settling in his bones. The lanterns flickered softly, casting a gentle light across the room, but it did little to chase away the darkness that had seeped into his soul. Each flicker felt like a heartbeat, a reminder of the life that had thrummed within these walls, now dimmed to a mere whisper. He moved through the lantern room, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor, and paused at the table where they had shared their meals. The remnants of their last supper remained, untouched and cold, a stark reminder of the abruptness of their departure. The bread lay stale, the cheese hardened, and the air felt thick with the weight of unspoken words. As he reached for the logbook, a sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, sending a shiver through the room. Thomas glanced up, his heart racing, half expecting to see a figure standing there, a shadow of one of his companions. But the space remained empty, the darkness lingering just outside the light's reach. He opened the logbook, its pages worn and filled with the meticulous records of their watch. Each entry was a testament to their existence, a chronicle of their duty as keepers of the light. But now, as he scanned the familiar handwriting, the absence of his friends felt like a gaping wound, one that could never be filled. "Where are you?" he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of his sorrow. The lighthouse creaked, the sound reverberating through the walls, and for a moment, Thomas thought he heard a response, an echo of laughter, a familiar voice calling out to him from the depths of the night. But the moment passed, leaving only silence in its wake. The air felt thick, as though the lighthouse was holding its breath, waiting for him to make sense of the chaos that had unfolded. He closed the logbook, the sound of the pages rustling like whispers on the wind. The lanterns flickered again, casting elongated shadows that danced along the stone walls, and he felt the weight of the night press down upon him. It was a reminder of the stories that lingered within these walls, the memories of those who had come before, and the secrets that remained just out of reach. The wind howled outside, and the light from the lanterns flickered once more, illuminating the empty room with a soft glow that felt fragile against the encroaching darkness. Thomas took a deep breath, steeling himself against the swell of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. He could not remain trapped in the void. He had to seek answers, to confront the mysteries that lay beneath the surface. As he stepped toward the door, the lighthouse stood behind him, a silent guardian against the tempest that raged outside. It was a reminder of the bonds they had forged and the duty that lay ahead. He would not allow fear to claim him. He would honor the memory of his friends by uncovering the truth of their disappearance. With resolve in his heart, Thomas opened the door and stepped out into the cool morning air. The fog swirled around him, wrapping him in its embrace as he ventured toward the edge of the cliffs. The sea roared beneath, a powerful force that beckoned him closer, urging him to confront whatever lay hidden in the depths. The lighthouse still stood, a silent effigy against the rising sun, its light a beacon of hope amidst the shadows of the past. And as Thomas moved forward, he felt the whispers of the Isles echo in his heart, a reminder that the journey was just beginning. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles awaited, wrapped in the calm yet intriguing embrace of dawn. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a soft, golden light across the Flannan Isles. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of salt and a hint of earthiness from the dew-kissed grass. A gentle breeze rustled the tall grasses that danced along the cliffs, creating a soothing symphony that blended with the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. It was a new day, yet the island felt heavy with an unspoken mystery. Aboard the relief vessel, the Hesperus, a small crew busied themselves with preparations as they approached the lighthouse. The men moved with purpose, their conversations punctuated by laughter and banter, a stark contrast to the eerie silence that enveloped the Isles. They were the harbingers of hope, expected to bring news and relief to the keepers who had long tended the light. Yet, as they rounded the rocky outcrop, a sense of unease washed over them. "Where are they?" One crew member, a tall man with a weathered face named Samuel, called out as they docked the boat. His brow furrowed as he scanned the rocky shore for any sign of life. "There should be someone here waiting." The rest of the crew exchanged glances, their cheerful demeanor faltering as they stepped onto the damp ground. The lighthouse loomed above them, its white walls stark against the azure sky. But the light that should have greeted them was dim, flickering as if struggling against an unseen weight. "Maybe they're just busy," another member suggested, though the uncertainty in his voice betrayed his hope. "They've been out here for a while after all. Perhaps they're tending to something inside." As they made their way up the worn path, the sound of their boots crunching against gravel echoed in the stillness. The lighthouse loomed ahead, a steadfast structure that had weathered countless storms. Yet today it felt different, almost somber, as if the very stones held their breath. Pushing open the heavy door, the crew was met with a profound silence that settled heavily over them. The familiar scent of oil and salt lingered in the air, but it was tinged with an underlying tension, a feeling that something was not quite right. "James? Donald? Thomas?" Samuel called, his voice rising above the stillness. The echoes of his words faded into the shadows, swallowed by the weight of the silence. As they stepped inside, the lantern room came into view, bathed in the soft glow of the remaining light. Yet it flickered uncertainly, as if it too was aware of the absence of its keepers. The tables were set with remnants of a meal long forgotten, the bread stale and the cheese hardened. It was a scene of domesticity interrupted, a reminder of lives once lived within these walls. "Look at this," one of the crew members said, pointing toward the logbook resting on the table. He flipped it open, scanning the entries, his brow furrowing deeper with each line. "They've been documenting everything, but there's nothing here about what happened. It's like they just vanished." Samuel stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. No storms recorded, yet the lights barely flickering. This doesn't make sense. They moved through the lighthouse, investigating each room with growing curiosity and concern. The clocks stood still, their hands frozen in time, and the air felt heavy with the weight of unfinished tasks. There were dishes left unwashed, charts scattered on the table, and tools that lay where they had been dropped. It was as if the keepers had stepped out for a moment, but never returned. "Something must have happened," Samuel said, his voice dropping into a whisper as he glanced back toward the door. "They wouldn't just leave without a word." As they continued their search, the atmosphere thickened with unanswered questions. The walls seemed to close in around them, each shadow a reminder of the men who had once filled this space with laughter and camaraderie. Outside, the sea roared, but inside, the silence felt like a tomb, heavy and suffocating. "Maybe we should check outside," one of the crew suggested, his voice barely breaking the stillness. "They might have gone down to the shore or something." With a collective nod, they stepped back into the cool morning air. The mist still clung to the ground, swirling around their ankles like a ghostly shroud. The scent of the sea was sharp, mingling with the fresh earth. But there was an underlying tension that hung in the air, a feeling that they were being watched. As they approached the edge of the cliffs, the water churned violently below, waves crashing against the rocks with a ferocity that sent sprays of salt water into the air. "Look!" one crew member shouted, pointing toward the horizon where the mist seemed to part, revealing a faint outline of a figure standing at the water's edge. Samuel squinted, his heart racing as he tried to discern the shape. "Is that—" he began, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the swirling fog as quickly as it had appeared. "Did you see that?" another crew member asked, his voice trembling with excitement and fear. "It was like someone was there, but then they vanished," Samuel finished, his mind racing with possibilities. "We need to investigate." They moved closer to the edge, the roar of the sea echoing in their ears as they peered into the depths. The air was thick with anticipation, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The lighthouse stood behind them, a silent guardian against the unknown, but now it felt more like a threshold, a boundary between the safety of the light and the mysteries that lay beyond. As they stood there, the wind picked up, swirling around them, a gentle reminder of the power of the sea. The whispers of the past lingered in the air, and Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever had happened to the keepers, he knew they were tied to the secrets of the Isles, woven into the very fabric of the lighthouse. Gathering their resolve, the crew took a deep breath, ready to confront the unknown. Today was just the beginning, a step into a mystery that promised to unravel the stories held within the shadows of the Flannan Isles. The light may flicker, but hope remained, a beacon guiding them forward into the depths of the unfolding mystery. The pale morning light spilled through the high windows of the lighthouse, casting soft rays that danced across the stone floor. The air was crisp, filled with the salty tang of the sea and the earthy scent of damp earth. Thomas Marshall stood at the threshold, his heart heavy as he stared at the scene before him. The remnants of their lives scattered like forgotten dreams. The relief vessel had arrived just as the sun began to rise, its crew stepping onto the rocky shore with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They had expected to find the keepers tending to their duties, but what they discovered instead was a haunting silence that clung to the air like a shroud. The lighthouse, once a beacon of hope, now felt more like a tomb, echoing with the absence of its guardians. As the new arrivals began their investigation, Thomas felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He watched as one of the crew members, a tall man with a weathered face named Samuel, stepped forward, his brow furrowed in contemplation. "Where are they?" he called out, his voice echoing against the stone walls. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of uncertainty. The crew moved cautiously through the lantern room, their footsteps muted against the cold floor. Thomas could see the unease etched on their faces as they took in the disarray. The table set for a meal yet untouched, the logbook lying open with entries that spoke of mundane tasks and quiet nights. But the latest pages were blank, a chilling reminder of the sudden stillness that had enveloped the lighthouse. "Look at this," one of the crew members said, pointing to a pile of clothing abandoned in a corner. "They just left it here." The wind whistled through the cracks, as if mocking their discovery. Samuel knelt down, running his fingers over the fabric, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "It's as if they vanished into thin air. This isn't right." Thomas felt a chill crawl up his spine at the thought. He stepped closer, peering over Samuel's shoulder at the discarded garments. They were worn and familiar, yet the absence of their owners loomed larger than life. "They wouldn't leave without a word," he murmured, the weight of his own disbelief settling heavily upon him. The crew began to gather their thoughts, exchanging glances filled with questions. One man, his voice steady yet tinged with disbelief, said, "The island holds its secrets close, and it's up to us to pry them open." The words resonated with Thomas, sparking a flicker of determination amidst the uncertainty that surrounded them. As they continued their search, Thomas lingered by the window, gazing out at the turbulent sea. The waves crashed violently against the rocks, their relentless rhythm a stark contrast to the stillness inside. He could almost hear the echoes of the past, the laughter of his friends, the stories shared over meals, the camaraderie that had defined their lives. But now, that warmth had been replaced by an unsettling chill, a reminder of the darkness that loomed just beyond the lighthouse walls. "Perhaps there's something we're missing," Samuel suggested, his voice rising above the sound of the roaring sea. We need to explore further, to understand what happened here. The crew nodded in agreement, their resolve strengthening as they moved toward the door. Thomas felt a pang of anxiety gnawing at him, a sense that whatever lay ahead would unravel the very fabric of their understanding. He hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the lantern room, the flickering light a meager shield against the shadows that threatened to encroach. With a deep breath, he followed the crew outside, stepping into the cool morning air. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the rugged cliffs and the churning sea below. The horizon stretched endlessly before them, and Thomas could feel the weight of the unknown settle upon his shoulders like a cloak. They made their way toward the edge of the cliffs, the sound of the waves crashing echoing in their ears. The sea roared with a ferocity that spoke of ancient secrets, and Thomas felt an inexplicable pull toward the water. It was as if the ocean itself was beckoning him closer, urging him to confront the mysteries that had been hidden for too long. "Stay together," Samuel instructed, his voice steady as they approached the rocky outcrop. The crew members formed a tight circle, their lanterns casting warm glows in the encroaching fog. "We need to be cautious." As they peered into the depths below, Thomas felt a shiver race down his spine. The water churned violently, waves crashing against the rocks like thunder. Yet in that chaos, he sensed something else, an undercurrent of energy that whispered of the past. The sea was alive, teeming with stories waiting to be told. "Do you think they're out there?" one crew member asked, his voice trembling slightly. "What if they were caught in the storm?" Thomas shook his head, his heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty. "We cannot give in to fear. We must find the truth." With resolve, they turned back toward the lighthouse, the wind whipping through their hair as they moved. The light, though flickering, remained a beacon of hope, and as they climbed back up the path, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would uncover the secrets of the Flannan Isles, no matter the cost. As they stepped inside the lighthouse once more, the air felt charged with anticipation. The mysteries that had haunted them would no longer remain buried. They would face the truth, together. The light may flicker, but the bond they shared was unwavering, and with each passing moment, they drew closer to the answers that awaited them in the depths of the unknown. The storm had passed, leaving a stillness that hung over the Flannan Isles like a veil. The moon hung low in the sky, its silvery light spilling over the rocky cliffs and shimmering over the dark waters. The lighthouse, now a solitary figure against the night, stood resolute, its light flickering as if it too were holding its breath, waiting for something to reveal itself. On the surface, all seemed calm, but beneath the placid exterior, whispers traveled on the wind, carrying secrets that only the waves dared to speak. In the distance, the rhythmic crash of the ocean created a soothing symphony, yet it felt laden with a tension that hinted at the mysteries still lurking in the shadows. As the night deepened, a lone fisherman in a small boat drifted near the rocky shore. He had ventured out despite the remnants of the storm, drawn by the promise of the sea and the familiar comfort of the lighthouse's light. But as he gazed toward the tower, a flicker caught his eye. Something unusual, something ethereal. The light, which had been a steady beacon, began to wane, pulsing gently, as if acknowledging the presence of the night. It flickered once, twice, then dimmed to a ghostly glow. The fisherman squinted, his heart racing as he realized the light was no longer the steadfast guide he had always relied upon. Instead, it seemed to beckon him closer, dancing with a life of its own. "Is that you, James?" he called into the night, his voice barely rising above the sound of the crashing waves. But the only response was the whisper of the wind, swirling around him like an uninvited guest. The air felt charged, electric with an energy he couldn't quite place, and he felt a chill crawl up his spine. The boat bobbed gently on the water, and the fisherman found himself drawn toward the lighthouse. The light continued to flicker, now taking on a spectral quality, illuminating the fog that clung to the cliffs like a ghostly shroud. He felt a strange pull, as if the very essence of the lighthouse was calling him, urging him to investigate the enigma that lay within. As he drew nearer, the light pulsed again, brighter this time, casting long shadows that danced across the rocky shore. It flickered and dimmed, a silent language spoken only between the keeper and the sea. He could hardly believe his eyes. Was this a sign? A warning? The fisherman's heart raced as he maneuvered his boat closer to the rocks, the waves crashing against the hull. He felt a surge of courage, a determination to uncover the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. "I'm coming," he shouted, the words echoing into the night, swallowed by the vastness of the sea. But as the boat approached the shore, the light flickered once more, and then without warning, it extinguished entirely. The lighthouse was plunged into darkness, leaving only the sound of the wind and the crashing waves. The fisherman's heart sank, confusion washing over him as he scanned the cliffs. Had he imagined it all? "James," he called again, but the only reply was the relentless roar of the ocean, a reminder of the unknown that lurked just beyond the reach of understanding. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken truths and the weight of the past. He hesitated, torn between the urge to turn back and the pull of the lighthouse that seemed to whisper his name. The stories of the keepers, the tales of their vigilance, echoed in his mind, urging him to confront the mystery that enveloped the isles. The moon shone brightly overhead, illuminating the fog that clung to the cliffs, and in that moment, he felt a connection, a bond to those who had come before him, to the keepers who had dedicated their lives to guarding the light. He would not turn away from the shadows. He would seek the truth that lay hidden within. With a determined heart, he steered his boat toward the rocky shore, the waves crashing against the hull as he prepared to disembark. The air was thick with anticipation, and as he stepped onto the damp stones, he could feel the weight of history pressing down upon him. The lighthouse stood silent, its presence both a comfort and a mystery. The light had vanished, but the stories it held remained alive, woven into the very fabric of the Flannan Isles. The fisherman took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He would uncover the secrets that lingered in the shadows, and as he stepped forward, he realized that he was not alone. The echoes of the past would guide him, urging him to listen closely to the whispers of the sea. The night had only just begun, and the mysteries of the lighthouse awaited, wrapped in the calm yet intriguing embrace of the unfolding dawn. The warm glow of the hearth flickered softly in the snug pub, casting dancing shadows on the walls that held decades of maritime memorabilia. The scent of peat smoke mingled with the rich aroma of ale, creating an inviting atmosphere where the weary could find solace from the chill outside. The low murmur of conversation filled the air, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. But it was an older mariner seated at the bar who commanded the attention of the younger sailors gathered around him. With a weathered hand, he cradled a tankard of ale, his voice steady and deep, carrying the weight of countless stories woven into the fabric of his life. "Aye, the Flannan Isles," he began, his gaze drifting toward the flickering shadows as if recalling a distant memory. "They say the sea has its own rules and tales. Ours is to merely listen." He paused, letting the silence settle over the room like a warm blanket. The younger sailors leaned in closer, their eyes glinting with curiosity, eager to hear the tale that had become legend among those who braved the ocean's depths. "There were once 3 keepers," he continued, his voice softening with nostalgia. "James, Thomas, and Donald, guardians of the lighthouse. They stood watch over the treacherous waters, their light a beacon for the lost and the weary. But one fateful night, the sea grew restless. A chill swept through the room, and the fire crackled, casting a flickering glow that mirrored the tension in the air. It was said that the waves whispered secrets, urging them to listen. And listen they did. But what they heard was not meant for mortal ears." The young sailors exchanged glances, the intrigue palpable as they hung on his every word. The older mariner leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "On that stormy night, the light flickered, dimmed, and went out. In the darkness, the keepers vanished, taken by the very sea they had sworn to protect. A hushed silence enveloped the pub, the flickering flames casting shadows that danced like specters at the edges of their imaginations. Some say they still roam the cliffs, their spirits intertwined with the tides, bound to the lighthouse for all eternity," he said, his voice rising as passion ignited in his storytelling. "Others believe they were called to the depths, to join the souls of sailors lost before them." One of the younger sailors, his eyes wide with wonder, asked, "But how can that be? Surely they must have left some sign, a clue of what happened." The older mariner chuckled softly, the sound warm and rich. "Ah, lad, that's the thing about the sea. It holds its secrets close. Many have ventured to the isles in search of the truth, but the whispers of the wind and the waves are fickle. They tell tales that change with the tide, leaving only fragments for those brave enough to listen." He took a long sip from his tankard, savoring the moment before continuing. "It's said that on stormy nights, if you stand near the cliffs, you can hear them, James, Thomas, and Donald, calling out to the waves, their voices woven into the very fabric of the night. It's a haunting melody that lingers in the air, a reminder of the duty they upheld and the mysteries they left behind." The room was silent, the weight of the story settling over the sailors like a thick fog. Outside, the wind howled, echoing the mariner's words, a haunting refrain that intertwined with the very essence of the Isles. The hearth crackled, sending sparks dancing into the air, and the scent of burning peat filled their lungs, grounding them in the moment. "Those who sail the waters near the Isles know better than to underestimate the sea," the mariner concluded, his voice steady. "Respect her, and she may guide you home. Disrespect her, and you may find yourself a part of her tales, a whisper on the wind, a shadow in the night. As he finished, the younger sailors exchanged glances, the thrill of the story igniting their imaginations. In that moment, the tales of the Flannan Isles became more than just folklore. They transformed into a legacy, a bond that would tie them to the sea and to each other, forever entwined in the fabric of the ocean's mysteries. And as the night deepened, the glow of the hearth flickered against the darkened windows, a warm reminder that while the sea held its secrets, the stories shared in the light would endure, echoing through time like the waves themselves, timeless, haunting, and forever alive in the hearts of those willing to listen. The moon hung high in the velvet sky, casting a silvery glow over the harbor as the tide lapped gently at the wooden docks. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and seaweed, mingling with the faint aroma of peat smoke wafting from nearby cottages. In this tranquil moment, the world felt suspended, as if holding its breath in anticipation of something yet to unfold. Thomas Marshall wandered along the dimly lit dock, his footsteps echoing softly against the weathered planks. The night was calm, yet an undercurrent of tension gripped his heart, a sensation that had lingered since the rescue crew had arrived at the lighthouse. The absence of his companions, James and Donald, weighed heavily on him, leaving a void that felt impossible to fill. He paused, leaning against a railing, allowing the cool air to wash over him. The waves shimmered under the moonlight, their rhythmic crash a gentle reminder of the sea's eternal presence. Yet, it was the silence that unsettled him most, the stillness that seemed to stretch endlessly, as if the night itself were listening. A soft sound broke the tranquility, drawing Thomas's attention toward the end of the dock. There, cloaked in shadows, stood a figure, a silhouette against the waning light. The figure moved with an ethereal grace, gliding closer, and Thomas felt a chill creep up his spine. He strained to see, his heart racing as he attempted to discern the identity of the stranger. "Who goes there?" he called, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. The figure paused, turning slightly, and for a brief moment, the moonlight caught the outline of a face. It was a visage both familiar and haunting, a blend of features he thought he recognized but could not quite place. As the figure took another step forward, a sailor approached, his expression a mixture of curiosity and unease. "It's just an old tale," he murmured, glancing nervously at the figure. "The fourth man of the Isles. They say he wanders these docks at night, drawn by the light of the lighthouse." Thomas turned to the sailor, confusion knitting his brow. "The fourth man? What do you mean?" "The legend says there were once 4 keepers here," the sailor explained, his voice low as if afraid to disturb the night. "But one vanished without a trace, his spirit forever tied to the sea. Some say he watches over the lighthouse, seeking to guide the lost." The figure moved closer, and Thomas felt a strange pull toward it, as if the very essence of the man was woven into the fabric of the night. "But why now?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Why would he appear when the others are gone?" The sailor shrugged, his gaze shifting back to the figure. "Perhaps he seeks closure, or perhaps he's trying to warn us of something yet to come." As the figure drew nearer, Thomas felt a rush of recognition. It was fleeting, a whisper of a memory locked away in the recesses of his mind. The man's eyes glimmered in the moonlight, filled with a longing that transcended time and space. Are you, are you here to tell us? Thomas ventured, his heart pounding. But before the figure could respond, a gust of wind swept through the dock, sending a shiver down Thomas's spine. The figure faltered, then turned abruptly, retreating into the shadows from whence it came, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps and the lingering air of mystery. "Wait!" Thomas called after him, but it was too late. The figure had vanished, swallowed by the night. He turned back to the sailor, confusion swirling in his mind. "Did you see that?" "Aye," the sailor replied, his voice carrying a tremor of awe. "The fourth man. He's real, then." Thomas stood at the edge of the dock, the waves crashing below. The stories he had heard echoed in his mind, blending with the weight of his own experiences. "What does it mean?" he murmured, contemplating the connection between the past and present, the whispers of the isles and the truth that lay hidden beneath the surface. The sailor placed a reassuring hand on Thomas's shoulder, grounding him in the moment. "We must heed his warning, whatever it may be. The sea holds its secrets, but it also guides us if we're willing to listen." As the moon cast its silvery glow over the harbor, Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles beckoned, and now, more than ever, he was determined to uncover the truth. The fourth man's presence lingered in the air, a reminder that the past and present were intertwined, and that the stories they carried were as alive as the sea itself. With the dawn approaching, Thomas turned back toward the lighthouse, the flickering light now a beacon of hope amidst the shadows. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with courage, and together with the echoes of those who had come before, he would unravel the secrets that bound them to the depths of the ocean. As he walked, the whispers of the night faded into the gentle lapping of the waves, and the promise of a new day stretched before him, filled with the possibility of discovery and the echoes of the stories yet to be told. The calm sea stretched out before Thomas Marshall, its surface shimmering like glass under the soft light of dawn. A gentle breeze brushed against his face as he stood at the edge of the cliff, the coolness of the morning air mingling with the warmth of the sun that slowly crested the horizon. He took a deep breath, allowing the scent of salt and seaweed to fill his lungs, grounding himself in the moment. The lighthouse loomed behind him, a steadfast guardian against the wildness of the ocean. Yet today, it felt different. More like a keeper of memories than a protector of souls. The events of the past few weeks weighed heavily upon him, the echoes of laughter and camaraderie now replaced by an unsettling silence. James and Donald were gone, their absence a constant reminder of the fragility of life on the Isles. As he gazed out at the tranquil waters, Thomas felt a profound sense of loss mingled with an overwhelming connection to the place he had called home. The sea, once a source of comfort and adventure, now appeared as a vast expanse of mystery, its depths holding secrets that he could not unlock. He could almost hear the whispers of the waves, their gentle lapping against the rocks like a lullaby, urging him to reflect on what had transpired. The tales of the keepers lingered in the air, whispered superstitions brushing against his consciousness like the gentle waves that caressed the shore. They spoke of souls intertwined with the sea, of those who had vanished into the depths, leaving behind only memories and questions. Thomas had always dismissed such stories as folklore, the fabric of local legend meant to entertain and frighten. Yet now, standing on the precipice of the world, he found himself drawn to their truths. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the sounds of the island to envelop him. The calls of seabirds soaring overhead, the rustle of grass in the breeze, and the distant roar of the ocean. Each sound was a reminder of the life that thrived around him, a stark contrast to the void that had settled in his heart. He could picture James's hearty laughter ringing out across the cliffs, Donald's quiet wisdom lingering in the air. Their spirits felt close, as if they were watching over him, urging him to continue the journey they had begun together. With a slow, deliberate movement, Thomas turned his gaze back toward the lighthouse. The light, though dimmed, still cast a soft glow, a beacon of hope amidst the shadows. It represented not only the duty they had upheld, but also the stories yet to be told. Stories of courage, loss, and the enduring bond forged by those who dared to stand against the wildness of the sea. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, the fog lifted, revealing the rugged beauty of the coastline. The cliffs stood proud against the backdrop of the vast ocean, a testament to the resilience of nature and the human spirit. Thomas felt a sense of renewal wash over him. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles were far from over. They were merely waiting to be unearthed. He took a step back from the edge, a newfound determination igniting within him. The questions that had haunted him for so long were not merely burdens, but invitations to explore, to seek the truth behind the legends that surrounded the lighthouse. With each passing moment, he felt the call of the sea grow stronger, a gentle whisper urging him to dive deeper into the unknown. As he made his way back toward the lighthouse, Thomas glanced over his shoulder one last time, the waves crashing below a reminder of the powerful force that lay beneath. The stories, the echoes of the past, would guide him as he ventured forth. He was not alone. He carried the spirits of his friends with him, their laughter and wisdom woven into the very fabric of the isles. The lighthouse stood tall against the morning sky, its light a steadfast promise that no matter how dark the night may grow, dawn would always follow. Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past settle within him even as the promise of the future beckoned. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles awaited, and he was ready to confront them, guided by the light and the echoes of those who had come before. The soft light of dawn spilled across the horizon, painting the sky in delicate hues of peach and gold as the first rays of sunlight broke through the lingering mist that clung to the Flannan Isles. The air was crisp and fresh, the scent of salt mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil, a reminder of the night that had just passed. Thomas stood outside the lighthouse, gazing out over the calm waters, the rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the rocky shore, providing a soothing backdrop that seemed to cradle his thoughts. He had come to stand at the old closed gate, a place where the island felt alive with memories, where the whispers of the past echoed softly in the breeze. Every rustle among the grasses felt like a conversation, a gentle reminder that the land itself remembered the keepers who had once tended to its light. There was a tranquility here that felt timeless, a space where the burdens of the world melted away, leaving only the essence of what had been. As Thomas breathed in the salty air, he reflected on the journey that had led him to this moment. The lighthouse, once a place of camaraderie and laughter, now stood as a testament to the sacrifices made by those who had dedicated their lives to guiding others. James and Donald were gone, their absence a weight upon his heart, but their spirits lingered in the very stones of this place, woven into the fabric of the island itself. He turned to look back at the lighthouse, its white structure gleaming softly in the morning light. The beam that had once flickered with uncertainty now reigniting with purpose. The light, a symbol of hope and guidance, cast its glow out across the sea, reaching for the horizon, as if to say that while the keepers may have vanished, their watch was far from over. The whispers of the waves seemed to rise in harmony with the light, a gentle melody that resonated deep within him. Thomas could almost hear the echoes of his friends, their laughter mingling with the sound of the sea, their stories dancing on the wind. They had faced the unknown together, and though the shadows had claimed them, their legacy remained etched in the hearts of those who had known them. With each passing moment, the sun climbed higher, the warmth spreading across the landscape like a soft embrace. Thomas felt a renewed sense of purpose swell within him. He could not change the past, nor could he bring back those he had lost, but he could honor their memory by continuing the vigil they had begun. The mysteries of the Flannan Isles would be unraveled, and the truth that lay hidden beneath the waves would be brought to light. As he stood there, a gentle breeze wrapped around him, carrying with it the soft whispers of the sea. It felt as if the island itself was urging him forward, a reminder that the stories of the lighthouse would continue, ever woven into the fabric of the isles. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the cool air to fill his lungs, grounding him in the present. "Thank you," he whispered into the wind, a quiet promise to the spirits of the keepers who had come before him. "I will carry your light." With that, Thomas turned back toward the lighthouse, the sun casting long shadows behind him. The path ahead was uncertain, but he felt the strength of the island beneath his feet, the echoes of its history guiding him onward. The light would shine anew, illuminating the way for those who would come after him, and the legacy of the keepers would not be forgotten. Together, they would face whatever mysteries the sea held, and as long as the lighthouse stood, their stories would live on, forever entwined with the tides, echoing through the ages like the gentle whispers of the waves. The Flannan Isles would remain a sanctuary for those who dared to listen, and the light would guide them home,